Great. So welcome everyone to our FIC Coalition meeting, which we host every Friday at 11:30 Mountain Time. So welcome to any of the newcomers who are attending today. We're going to do a little bit of a different structure today, as sometimes we have a little bit less time and a lot of things to say. So we will structure it a little bit, and then we will arrange questions. We'll just go over the agenda. And if I can kindly ask everyone to mute themselves when they aren't speaking, that would be great. And that will allow us to make sure that there's no feedback happening in the background. So the agenda for today, we are going to start with a little bit of a government updates, which I will be giving today as Chris was unable to join us. And then any comments you have on the government lobbying that we are doing or any of the updates. And then we are going to go on to the next topic today, which is going to be the future outlook of the industry. So for the future outlook of the industry, we are going to be talking about big box gyms, which Scott Wildeman will be discussing. We'll be talking about the studio and boutique industry, which David Hardy will be discussing, and then the future of personal training, which Hagan will be connecting with us on. And then after we do each of those sections, we'll do a little bit of a question and comments before we go on to our provincial reviews. And as you know, for our provincial reviews, we always go over the provinces and go through updates and any new information that has come up. So with that, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of the government information that has come out. So on May 19th, there was an expansion of the Canada Emergency Benefit Account. So this expansion was to help small businesses. And when it comes to small businesses, the reason we think it's going to help the fitness industry is because it does, or it's potentially supposed to help those who have employees that are on contract. So that's something that we are hopeful for. And this is also a interest-free loan of up to $40,000. And we put out a notice for this earlier in the week to provide any information that anyone needed. And this was to be updated starting on Monday. And they said it'll take up to a week to get the funds rolling in. So other than that update, for the rent subsidy program, there has been an update to the Cmhc website. So I will send that link out to everybody who is on the call right now to make sure that you know what the updates are. And we also had a meeting, Chris and I had a meeting with small businesses, and they did mention that there is going to be support for larger businesses as well that is coming out. So we hope to hear about that sometime next week. And another lobbying effort is the tax credit. As you know, it has been something that we have been looking into doing for quite a while now. We have created an outline of what would be helpful for having the tax credit in place, and we are connecting with government officials with that as kind of a side lobbying. So it looks like we are doing something that is also that's positive for the economy, getting people back into gyms when there is a reopening, and how the government can support that way. So that is a little bit of the reviews when it comes to the government and what we have in place. And if you have any questions, feel free to either put them in the chat box or ask them now, and then I can take them to Chris, who is our lobbyist. So. No questions. And has anybody had any trouble with the wage subsidy program, getting the funds in or anything like that? Just any comments at all regarding this?
My accountant is going to speak today to CRA. Good luck to her, but we'll find out. I'll let you know what happened.
Perfect, Angela. Yeah, just keep us posted. And if anybody has any comments throughout, you have my email. Really do make sure you do connect in, because we'd like to hear the voices and ideas and thoughts from everybody who's on this call in order to go forward to the government with anything we need. All right, so we are moving along. I see, oh, there's Fiona, you have a comment here. As a new gym, 2 weeks from opening, we were not eligible, nothing so far. So that's actually good to know. So that will be another note that we can bring through. So thank you for sending that. Yeah. All right, thank you, everyone. So the next thing I do want to bring up that is on our agenda items, as you'll notice, I sent out kind of a minute to minute, so we don't run out of time. Now, we can move on to the future outlook of the industry. Now, when we talk about the future outlook of the industry, we want to be talking about business strategies, what we are actually looking at practically when it comes to having a business. So besides the reopening strategies, kind of your focus on what will make the business work. So with that, we'll start with big box gyms. So Scott, if you'd like to take it away.
Perfect, thank you. So just in a few different interviews and conversations over the past couple of weeks, as well as our experience, you know, I think the future of large format facilities, I don't like big box gyms, I like large format clubs. You know, I think for sure we're going to see people booking in for their sessions. I think in the short and potentially medium term, gone are the days of just showing up to the gym when you want to get a workout. I think we're going to require a lot more pre-planning on the part of the member. So booking in using an app or calling a facility to book their exercise session. You know, potentially group fitness classes will be smaller in size, social distancing parameters, etc. But I think the other big change is going to be, well, two big changes besides having to book an appointment. One is augmenting with virtual. So I could see clients who used to come to the gym 3-4 times a week. Now they show up once, maybe twice a week, and augment their in-club training program with virtual training. Same thing with personal training clients. You know, a lot of clients train on a frequent basis with their trainer. I could see them meeting in person on a much less frequent basis and getting a lot of programming pushed out to them, or doing virtual sessions. Group training, I think, is going to be interesting. So if you have some really popular personal trainers and they had a small group training of 6 to 8 people, that might have to be limited to 4. But again, augmenting that with virtual programming. Besides all of the cleaning and social distancing efforts in the club, I think those will be some of the biggest changes to large format clubs. And then just in terms of timing and times of classes, etc., I think now that people are working from home more, you know, is the 9-to-5 job, is that going to be as common as in the past, or are people going to have more flexibility with their work days? And will peak times in the gym not exist anymore, meaning your 5 o'clock time, your 6 o'clock time, maybe that's as busy now as 2 o'clock, because now you have some people that are spaced out throughout the day. So those to me are going to be the biggest changes potentially impacting large format facilities. The facilities that have youth programming, gymnasiums, things along those lines, it'll be interesting to see what activities are allowed when. I know tennis is allowed in Alberta now, but basketball isn't, for example. So that will remain to be seen. And clubs with pools, I haven't seen any guidance on pools at this point. So, you know, for now, I think pools will be shut down for the short, potentially medium term. That's what I got.
Great, thanks, Scott. So we'll just go through the sessions for each section, and then we'll do questions. So let's move to Dave, if you can talk to us a little bit about studio and boutique.
Sure. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this over to Blake. Blake has been on a number of phone calls in the U.S. with US CEOs, and I think he may be able to speak to it a little better. Blake is the president of OTF Canada. Before that, he was also the president of World Health in Edmonton, and before that, Club Fit. So he's been 20, 25 years in the fitness industry, and as I said, we've just sort of divided and conquered, and I think he's been on some calls that will bring some good light. Blake, go ahead.
Thanks, Dave. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. Yeah, it's always good to hear Scott's take on certainly the larger format gyms, and we share a lot of the same conclusions I think that he has laid out. A couple things I want to point out. So with OrangeTheory, we've actually, by the end of this week, we'll have 260 odd studios open in various states in the US. So that's about, it's about 20% of our network at this point. And some of the learnings that we're hearing from a number of our studios in the US, as well as other gym concepts for different CEO calls that I've been on, is the big thing we're kind of hearing is this real split in social sentiment. There's one end of the spectrum in terms of lots of people are very, very happy to be back there. Let's call it 50-60% of the members are extremely happy to be back in and doing classes again. And there's 20 to 25% have selected to stay on freeze and are not okay coming back. And then there's like a bubble group that seems to be okay with coming back, but they have very high expectations around what should be happening in the studios, to the point where I think in a lot of cases we're not seeing regulating bodies or states actually police a lot of the rules and guidelines they put in place, but it's actually members who are taking photos and video of things they don't like, and then either threatening to go to the media or doing something else with it, posting on social media. So it's interesting to watch, and really in the US, there's all kinds of rules. Like, for example, in DC, we're seeing things like I think it's like 5 participants per 1,000 square feet, whereas in Arizona, for example, there's absolutely no rules. And the terminology I use, the Canadian terminology I use, was cowboy hockey. It's just a free for all, and it's you're on your own, and you're looking out for yourself. We've been very encouraged by a couple of things in Canada. We've seen BC and Manitoba allow openings for fitness, and I think Trisha will probably talk a little bit to that today. But those are good things. Although in meeting with our franchisees from both of those provinces, there's a real reluctance to be the first to open. I think we want to, at OrangeTheory, we're certainly sitting back, and we want to see what continues to happen in the U.S. as cases and hospitalizations start to spike in the next couple of weeks. And so some of the communication we sent out to our members has been around, mid to late June, or no sooner than mid to late June, in terms of our opening in those first couple of provinces. We do have some concerns, and we do want to see where social sentiment and government regulations go with a few of these things. There's been a lot of articles that have been circulating around concerns about high intensity exercise, in particular high intensity exercise in small spaces. So there's an article about a studio in South Korea, that there was 120 plus infections from. It's been repopulated in several different iterations through Forbes magazine and a number of other publications. There's also an article that came out recently that talks, and it's actually a CDC article from the US, that talks about the fact that the risk of spread of this from surfaces is much lower than they initially anticipated. So the risk is quite low from surfaces, but yet a lot higher than they expected from sort of airborne exposure. And so that, in conjunction with what we're seeing from the government of Canada and some of the comments that Trisha Tam has made recently, kind of lead us to believe that we may see some more stringent rules, or certainly provincial regulating bodies. We're worried that we're going to see some requirements for sport masks within both studios and large box clubs. So, at this point in time, I think we're in sort of a wait and watch mode, and I think a lot of the studio industry is really watching to the US to see what happens. I mean, they've received a lot of pressure to reopen, and really we're seeing it across all states, not just with OrangeTheory, but other concepts as well. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next 2 weeks. And I think both governments and our own larger studio chains in Canada will take a lot from what we're able to learn. And we certainly don't want to, push to open too soon and be stuck with, really heavy regulation and heavy, not a great experience for our members, that we could end up getting stuck with for the next, 18 months. So we're certainly concerned about it. And I think the next 2 to 3 weeks will be very telling.
I just want to add one more thing to that, Blake. There was an announcement this week about the CECRA program, which probably in a lot of ways benefits studios perhaps more than the large format operations. But we're starting to see landlords are sort of coming around to this. There was a press release, that was put out today by First Capital, which is one of the largest landlords in Canada, saying that they're going to be participating in the program. One of our landlords in Toronto that was against it has now, had a complete change of heart. So I'm expecting that we're going to see some moves on that. And I've got calls in the next week with most of the large landlords. I think a lot of them are waiting to see the application process, but it seems like it's pretty well laid out what the expectations are going to be. So again, I think that's real positive news for the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, both Dave and Blake. We will move to Mo now, who can connect us in with speaking about the future of training.
Hello, everybody. I'm just trying to get my video on, but I hope you can hear me all right.
Yes.
Thank you, Scott. So personal training, interesting, many things going on. I just thought I'd gather some of the commonalities with what I've been hearing from being on town halls, et cetera, as well as what I'm physically involved in discussions with Good Life Fitness in particular. Short term during COVID, there's been a transition for those trainers that are comfortable with online training to support the clients they presently have. Obviously, some are more comfortable with jumping onto Zoom or whatever platform they choose. Many are waiting to hear what their outcome is because most of them are, of course, not working. But those who have either done it on their own right or have been doing it in alignment with their studio or club, they seem to have really enjoyed staying connected to their clients, and their clients have been very grateful for that. And I've also noticed that personal trainers have been opening their services to small groups. So they're bringing their clients together in small group, virtually, of course, so that there's that camaraderie between clients. Long term, I feel that this is going to be a silver lining for personal training. What I know to be true from Good Life and the plans of reopening is personal trainers will have the choice to train clients face-to-face, or we call live in person, as well as live online, and it will be a choice. So I feel that will present opportunities for trainers to both serve their clients even more differently, having the flexibility on in person and virtually, but as well attract more clients that may not enjoy that face-to-face. They just would like to have a trainer to hold them accountable for things in more of a virtual world. Also, I am aware that personal training clients will continue to schedule their appointments with their trainers as per usual, which I believe is a routine practice for all. So that's not going to be a change, unlike group fitness, where many group fitness studios and clubs will have to book in for their class. Trainers will continue to do that as per normal. However, they will have to find new ways to spot, coach, and even program design what their clients will be doing in the live in person. At Good Life, we're going to be restricting trainers from working with their clients all around the club, from the cardio theater to the weight room to the turf zone. It'll be designated spaces they have to work within. So that'll require some adjustments to how they program. As far as spotting and coaching, to maintain physical distancing, At Good Life, the plan is that trainers will not hand clients their equipment, such as their dumbbells and straps and ropes and pulleys. The clients will be picking those up themselves to maintain as much distancing and exchange of physical contact. The setup of the personal training space, I mentioned it briefly as far as restricting clients from moving around the gym with their trainer. Many clubs and personal training studios that I've been fortunate enough to listen to their reopening plans. Carrie Keppel from the US, she's turning her gym floor and her training space into small training hubs, or sort of so-called studios within the club. So trainers will work in their own hub or space, and that's where they'll serve their clients. And of course, they'll be scheduling with space in between clients much differently than they have been, instead of the back-to-back client after client. At Good Life, we're planning a time between, I believe it's 30 minutes, so that they can clean all the equipment before they see their next client. That's again to uphold the cleanliness and sanitation piece. As far as physical distancing, I mentioned the spotting and handing of equipment to their clients. The other thing is, at Good Life, it is planned that personal trainers will wear gloves and masks when they train with clients. And I know that not to be true of group fitness. When group fitness instructors teach classes, they'll be able to teach without a mask, but they'll be asked to wear it when they're in the club walking around. And so, well, Good Life has made that their plan. I have heard mixed reviews in the industry as to what trainers and instructors will be asked to wear, such as gloves and masks. And many clubs are leaving it to a discussion between their trainers and their instructors and deciding what they feel most comfortable with, being that there may be options. I'm not sure if that's what I'd recommend, that they give the trainer the option to wear or not wear, but I'm just sharing. And lastly, to Blake's point around high intensity cardio exercise and the transmission of potential risk of transmission of the virus. I know some personal training studios are either removing cardio from their personal training offering for the next while, or they're really changing up their personal training cardio space, so to separate their clients. So that's very much an interesting one. And I was surprised to hear that myself, but it does make sense if there is a risk around the high intensity aerobic exercise piece. And that is what I have gathered as insight for today. Hopefully it's been helpful.
Thank you so much, Mel. Let's move to Nick to talk to us a little bit about virtual, and then we'll go over the questions that are in the chat box and any further questions anybody has on this topic before we go on to the provincial review.
Sure, thanks, Trisha. Just looking at sort of one thing I've noticed in watching, we've actually seen trainers adapt a lot more quickly to these new things than gyms have. Gyms have been a lot slower to make changes and get things online in general. Some have moved fairly quickly, but we've seen trainers be able to adapt and offer new services a lot quicker on the individual basis, especially since so many had been laid off from the gym, were on their own and having to pivot as it was faster, and the ability to do so. But what we saw and what I've seen is sort of the economics of the gyms pre-pandemic were already starting to dictate this shift. Obviously, the pandemic has accelerated it. And we're seeing a move, and I think what you're going to see with limited space and everything is a move from that old business model, which was entirely sort of membership and access based, shifting more to a service based model, and how that's going to be delivered. So there's a blend of those two things, as well as we're very used to selling training time in 1 hour blocks. We're going to see that shift from just that sort of 1 hour model into a more package-based model and into other services that are going to be offered. So to get sort of specific into some of the services that we're seeing offered and what I see evolving here, they've been kind of highlighted a little bit from some of the other speakers here. But obviously, we're seeing people that are streaming content now, whether that's free or at a subscription base for their people. As one service, we are seeing virtual training, so just training done from a distance. The other service that hasn't been hit on that I see a lot, which is being done a lot more now, is programming as a service. So the idea is people either checking in monthly and just getting a program, then training on their own, or they're getting the program and then all the oversight to the program is happening virtually through a tool like mine, like Trainer Plus. So, you know, they're getting the program once a month, and then the trainer's checking in and making changes to the program on an ongoing basis through the app. Or they're having both of those things plus some face-to-face time, whether it's like a weekly check-in or a weekly session or whatever it might be on the virtual side. So, you know, it's still they're still paying for programming plus the oversight plus a little bit of face time from trainers. So we're seeing services like that offered anywhere from, you know, if it's just a one meeting a month, we're seeing that offered from $20 to $50 a month. If they're doing sort of the program plus the oversight through our tool, we're seeing that offered from about $50 to $100 a month. And if they're doing the program, the oversight, and some check-ins, depending on how much face time they're getting with the trainer, we're seeing that anywhere from about $100 to about $300 a month. And then we're also seeing regular personal training sessions where they're doing, you know, 2 virtual sessions a week, and they're also sending the program, tracking it when they're working with the client directly, and also then having homework for the client on their own. So that sort of shift, especially as we see gyms be in limited capacity where they're not going to be able to have everybody in at the same time, but rather have their members come in, you know, once a month, once a week, once every couple of weeks, meet with the trainer, be put through the program they've got, and then be able to go on their own at home and execute the program and still interact with the trainer virtually. That's or, you know, through an app, or whether it's an app or spreadsheets, however it is. We're seeing, I really think we're going to see that shift, not just in the short term, but I think in the long term as well. We're already seeing consumer expectations changing. More and more people were finding programs online, whether it was like bodybuilding.com, Instagram, wherever it was. And gyms were already starting to have more and more competition from their personal training sales on a session-based basis with stuff that was online. So I think you're going to see that shift where gyms now and trainers are going to be selling variations of content, you know, programming services and their in-person time. The blend of those, I think we'll see kind of take over the market. In addition to that, I do see some gyms moving to a model where, you know, if they can't be using the equipment on the floor, doing a blend of programming with equipment rental, and also a real opportunity with assessment as a service, because people aren't going to be coming in and doing that as a regular basis, but there's going to be spaces in gyms there. People aren't going to be able to measure themselves well at home. We're hearing that now from clients who are struggling to measure their progress on an ongoing basis. And they're like, I just want to run into my gym to be able to hop on their scale or talk to a trainer and, you know, get measured or whatever it is. So we see an opportunity for assessment as a service as well, even for people who might be non-members. I know we've been doing that in the past, but that as an actual service and having the experts there that can do that properly for people who are still training virtually or online. So with all of those, I think that you're going to see, you know, more of a shift to these types of packages, so that you can get more people engaged and reach beyond the member base to that. There's also, I think, going to be a change since trainers have sort of had to redefine how they've operated over these last couple of months, and offering their own services. There might be a realignment of how trainers and gyms sort of the agreement between them and how they work. But I'll, you know, won't dive too much into that. I also think that the next big thing for the entire industry is how we reach into new markets. So, I mean, we already kind of touch on corporate wellness a little bit and a little bit of healthcare, but not too much. So how we use these new streaming services, virtual services, things like that, to actually start reaching into corporate wellness and healthcare is where I see the next big shift happening, because those markets are much, much, much larger. And as somebody touched on, with more people working remotely and at home for the foreseeable future, a lot of the old fitness benefits and wellness benefits that companies were offering aren't as viable anymore. So how that shift happens from the fitness industry actually offering those things out to companies, and eventually, you know, to also to healthcare and how insurance is going to cover that, I see as the next big shift as things are going.
Great, thanks, Nick. And there's a lot of topics there, so we'll make sure that we look into those for upcoming meetings. Let's move on to the chat box here. So starting at the top, Lynn, I believe your question here is for large format gyms. So are you guys thinking changing the common monthly unlimited access format to passes number of visits? So I'll get Scott to cover that question.
You know, it's interesting. I think that's a neat idea. I think there'll be a number of different packages people can choose from. And again, just tying it into potentially the online services. So I don't know the answer to that yet. I think there'll be more brainstorming and more discussion, and really the marketplace will decide what they want, and we'll get that feedback from customers specifically. So, but that's, you ask a very interesting question, Lynn.
We're starting to see a little bit of that shift from some of our customers. So some of that are offering programming as a service, and they're pricing it around the same as a monthly membership. They're seeing a lot of their members shifting that monthly membership to, that program with the trainer and the oversight, or whatever the equivalent price point is. And same with, usually they're pricing it around what sessions were. So if they had sessions outstanding, they're applying X number of sessions to these programming and online services. So we're already starting to see that, but yeah, I think the market will dictate as we come, as Scott said.
Now, the next question here from Melody is about what is the percentage you see coming back? And I believe this question was directed to studio and boutique.
So I can speak to what we've seen in the U.S., Trish.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so with the studios that have opened in the U.S. so far, they've done it's essentially a bulk unfreeze with an option to stay on freeze. And we're seeing anywhere from about 75 to 85% of members coming off freeze and agreeing to, obviously not coming back and choosing that unfreeze or the freeze, stay on freeze option. After the studio has been open for a week or two, there's probably another drop of about 5%. But we're seeing these studios settle out of between 65 and 75% of their original COVID membership base. And what we don't know is because public sentiment is very different in the U.S. than it is in Canada. And so what we may see, and I think I saw some stats that 77% of Canadians were happy with the pace of reopening for whatever it was, versus 48% in the U.S. So public sentiment in the U.S. has very much been towards, this thing is over. The president's telling us it's over. Let's just move ahead. I don't think we have that same public sentiment in Canada. So it will be interesting to see if we're able to, once we're able to reopen, see those same numbers.
Thanks, Blake. Further on in our chat, if you haven't noticed yet, there are some good links that were added by those on the call, so please do take a look at these articles. And there is another question here about virtual training, and when it comes to teachers who are hired for the clientele through classes and offer free classes online. Melody, do you want to explain your question a little bit before we go to answering it?
Yeah, I'm sorry. French is my first language. Hi, everybody. So I wanted to ask you if you had the same challenge as us, because we didn't close. We fight to offer like 100 classes per week live. So we continue hiring our teachers. But at the same time, they have that vision of free classes online all day. And now that in Montreal and Quebec, the parks are open, they have that movement of offering outside classes. So do you have an idea how to work with that? Because I understand we cannot block, teachers to work and, have revenue. But at the same time, it's hard because we really fight on exactly the same project. Do you have answers to that, idea, strategy?
I'll speak to that. I think it's really just everybody should have a look at your non-compete and your non-solicit agreements, whether they're contractors or employees, and make sure you have virtual and online as part of the services that you're talking about. So an instructor who taught in your facility, going and teaching in a boot camp in the park, that might be okay if they are a contractor and you don't have a non-compete and they're allowed to do that. But what's your non-solicit say? So are they online promoting that to your members saying, hey, I'm offering this thing in the park. and now they're actually directly soliciting your patrons. So I would have a good hard look at your non-solicit, your non-compete agreements, and make sure that online presence is in the language. And you may need to revise those.
Definitely. So that feeling, that weird feeling that we have, our 12 franchisees, it's quite normal. We find it kind of weird, that, and it's new for us. So it's kind of normal that it's kind of non-acceptable.
Yeah, so we've had trainers who, when the lockdown first happened, they sent free programs to their clients, and they were really doing out of a good place, like out of their heart. They wanted their clients to be successful. And now we've ramped up our online training to the point where trainers can come back to work and do this for a living. So now, if you're laid off, you can't do that, because now you're undercutting your colleagues potentially, and you have the opportunity to do that through the company. So it is tricky, but I would just make sure the language in your agreements is, encompassing online services as well.
Thank you.
It's Mo. I might just add in a comment on that. From listening to yoga franchise or in Singapore on FIT Summit Singapore last month, they had a yoga owner, and he said that he had his instructors move all their classes virtually online during their lockdown. And those instructors became such rock stars that when it came time to reopening, they actually were able to go back into the live setting, but bringing even new raving fans with them. And it was all about the relationship they created with those instructors, supporting their online initiatives. But when it came back to reopening, how they were able to integrate both to serve their clients, not only, when they were able to come back. So I think there's also an opportunity. You can actually work with your instructors who've been going online, giving things away for free, how they can help you move back into the live in studio, but also maintain that and see if there's an opportunity or a win-win between you and your instructors. I think I believe there is an opportunity there, and then transitioning to charging for their classes online now that we're coming back or coming to our new normal. You can transition them into pay for, even though they've been giving them away for free, but it does take time and a good marketing plan.
Definitely.
Great points, Mo.
Great, thank you. We'll do one more question, and the rest of the questions that are in the box, I believe we can touch on when we do the provincial reviews. So Lee has asked, how do we see pricing change within the health club space, membership, personal training, etc.?
I think it's similar to the previous question where, I think there's going to be a blend of services and, more choice potentially for customers. So it's a great question, and I think the market will dictate it to a large extent. I'm sorry, I cut somebody else off.
No, that's great, Scott. It's Mo. At Good Life, we're offering PT choices, either live in person or virtually live online, I guess is a better way to say it, at the same price. Just gives the client a choice. And that's going to really have to level up the trainers so that they offer the online experience as effective, even though it'll be different.
If I may, this is Mario in Ontario here. I've read some operators throughout the world and some jurisdictions talking about actually increasing their prices at a time like this. And the reason for that, of course, is the idea that you're still offering a service, and because you want the service, even though it's operating under relatively adverse conditions, you're going to be paying a premium for that. I'm not sure how that works. I haven't seen any kind of outcome in that regard, but I do know that some operators are working with that concept. For us here, we're actually reducing our prices. Again, we're a charitable organization and a community center. We've done a 25% reduction across the board for all our different types of memberships. So thus far, we presented that yesterday in a town hall meeting to a couple hundred of our members, and they seem to be greeted with almost universal applause. So if that gives any insight, there to have it.
I can speak just a little bit from what we've talked about, because quite honestly, you know, especially in the studio spaces work because you have the volumes. And if you're having to cut your space in half, and quite honestly, even the large format gyms work that way as well. It just going back to my economics 101, if you have less people in there, you probably, and you have to do that over a longer period of time, either you lose money or you have to increase your prices. And if you take a look at, you know, when gas prices went up, we all had a fuel surcharge on our bills for different services, even airline tickets. I expect that you're going to see the people that survive long-term do it. Talking to a friend in Canada, and even Tim Hortons, as usual, Tim Horton order was $5.40. He drove through the drive-through last week and it was $6.20. So expect there to be some, you know, people that are going to survive are going to have to figure out ways to make money, and it's just not going to be in volume. I think there's going to be a decrease in supply in terms of the number of offerings out there, but I also think I believe there's going to have to be some adjustment to pricing. And
I guess to sort of complement or go to the other way on that, on the supply and demand and the economics of it. Exactly what Dave said. There's going to be less volume in these gyms. So one, I think that's why you're going to see services, new additional services, and a range of them being offered. At the same time, there's quite a lot more supply of online content, free content, low cost content, virtual training. I wouldn't be surprised to see the price of training sessions have to come down a little bit on an hourly basis, because there's so much out there, and people are charging a lot less. The independent trainers are, because they don't have to travel, they don't have the overhead of paying for a gym on virtual. So we're seeing the price per session have come down, and then you have the gyms competing against that with everybody having moved virtual. So because there's so much of a huge supply of content in the market that's free and low cost, and then a new supply of virtual training that's also set at a lower cost than traditionally in the gym, there's going to have to be an adjustment from the gyms themselves on terms of how much they offer those services. And because they're not going to be able to get to the old volume models that, like Dave has talked about here, you're going to have to supplement that income in other ways. So, you know, where personal training was in a lot of cases where the profit margin came from, or the cherry on top of what membership paid for the expenses in a gym, I think you're going to have to see those types of services be a bigger piece of the revenue pie. And by going into the online side and the virtual side, you're able to reach far outside your member base from what you were just selling, you know, one-on-one sessions with the member base as well. So I think that's where it's going to be. You know, you can engage more people virtually, less people in the gym itself. You might see, like Dave said, the in price to be able to come in regularly to the gym might go up, and the rest of that revenue gap is going to be filled with services, which might come down because of the flood of them to the online market.
All right, great. So we will stop that conversation there, and we'll move on to our provincial updates. But this is a great topic that we can pick up again next week once everybody's had some time to digest and think about some new ideas. Now, we'll go to Nathalie to give us an update on what is happening in Quebec.
Hi guys, I'm going to be quick today because I know Quebec's taken up a lot of the time in these calls for the past few weeks. We did have a conversation with an attaché from the Health Minister's office this week, and the gist of that was, you guys are doing everything you should be doing. We're really pleased that you created a coalition and that you're working together. You're speaking to all the right people. We're thinking of you. The gym is the gyms are their own category, and it's part of the discussion. You're important for the health, immune health, physical health, mental health of our province. Please be patient, was essentially the gist of that conversation. And so they're aware that we already have health protocols in place even before all of this started. They understand that we are supportive when it comes to health. Their vision right now is a slowly but surely trickling opening of the province, which means they're focused on services that are just one person at a time. The therapeutic services are allowed to open as of next Monday, I think. So osteopaths, physiotherapists, etc., are allowed to start there. Unfortunately, the language was really not clear. So they talked about nutrition services, which then all the gyms says we do that too. But the doors of the gyms remain closed for now. The sport minister has announced that she's hoping that public health allows phase 2 outdoor exercise to take place, which will allow group activities as well as supervised activities. So I have a feeling everybody's going to throw themselves outside. What he did say we were allowed to say is that within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will hear something. For the people in Quebec who are on the phone, that always means outside of Montreal, because Montreal and Laval are the hotbeds of COVID right now in Canada. And so there's concerns as it relates to that. So that is where we're standing with that. His message was, we care about you. We know you're there. We know you need us. We know you want to open. We know you're prepared. We know you're going to take great care of people because that's the culture in gyms already. Please cool your jets. We'll get to you as soon as possible. And so we're now going back to the sport minister, who is meant to be the person who's taking care of us. And thank goodness, Nathalie Lambert, who's one of our members of FIC through the MAA, is actually good friends with Isabelle Charret, who's the sport minister in Quebec, both of them being former Olympians. So we're circling back around and just keep talking to people and ask to be patient. So that's the Quebec update.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to Alberta.
Great. So Alberta had some movement through a group of boutique studios who got together and created a petition and a really well done video. So the Alberta Alliance of Boutique Studios, many of whom are now on this call, so welcome. So we are able to engage with that group. We are also able to engage with a number of other groups, including the Alberta Recs and Parks Association, which manages all of the large municipally run rec centers. And we've been going back and forth on our proposal. We got the document from New Zealand. We got the documentation out of BC from the Fraser Valley Health Authority. And we are submitting our proposal next week. There was notice yesterday that Dr. Hinshaw, the Chief Medical Officer, is considering moving gyms into an alternative phase. She didn't say the word phase 2, but she said alternative phase. There is some concern about airborne transmission through higher intensity classes like Zumba or HIIT. And the article that I saw out of South Korea, I'll just point out, was the date of the transmission was in February, which I think was pre-lockdown. Now, maybe that's not correct for Korea, but it was some time ago. So I want to make sure that we have the most accurate data. But I think we have a very good shot of getting out of phase 3 into an alternative phase, hopefully phase 2.
Thanks, Scott. Let's go to BC now, who has started opening. So Carl, if you wanted to speak about BC, that'd be great.
Awesome. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of British Columbia. I'm certainly not an expert. I don't think any of us are on this for sure. And I don't have the years behind me. A lot of you guys do, but I do want to share a little bit about BC. The COVID-19 cases in British Columbia for the past 2.5 weeks have been between 3 to 25 of confirmed contracted cases, tested cases, confirmed positive. So we're in a really good place in terms of that in British Columbia. Most of the cases are isolated to certain areas, so they know where the virus is. And so because of that, we were able to move into phase 2. That happened very quickly in British Columbia. I think we were on a call last Friday, and after that call, there was a notice out saying gyms can open. Gym facilities can open as of this coming Tuesday. So the long weekend was Monday, and facilities could open Tuesday. So not a lot of time for preparation for a lot of facilities. And so where we're at now in British Columbia, I'll speak on the confirmed case as well, just really quickly. We opened businesses on Tuesday with restrictions, obviously. The cases remain very low in BC. However, as we all probably are aware, the cases lag behind, right? So, before somebody contracts the virus, it takes a few days to get the symptoms, if they even get the symptoms. So really the effect of BC opening its doors on Tuesday, we probably won't see how we're doing since opening the doors until the beginning to mid-June in terms of case counts. So that's something to be conscious of. It's an optimistic position that we're in, obviously, as businesses. We've had some smaller facilities and some big box facilities open up as of Tuesday and throughout this week. I haven't heard, like all of you, I'm reading the news, I'm reading updates, I'm talking to my friends in the business out here. I haven't heard of any updates of any horror stories with any of the clubs opening up, which is a positive. A very non-objective, positive assumption that I'm making based on just driving by some of the facilities that are open, the bigger box facilities that have been opened. I see lineups outside of their doors. Again, that's a subjective, using my eye to take a look at the appetite for members coming back. I anticipate the clubs that opened up don't have an app in place, for example, for people booking, but the fact that we do see lineups, I saw one facility with a lineup upwards of maybe 20, 25 people midday looking to get into the facility, which isn't it's a case for us to have some sort of a situation of pre-booking for sure. So if you're going to be opening up in the next couple of weeks, or if you're in another province that's a part of a phase that's coming up, really take a look at that, because I do think just based on that and some of the online stuff that we're seeing, social media stuff that we're seeing, there will be a huge appetite for pre-booking club visits. We have a lot of people, again, subjective, a lot of people through social media right now that are objecting to that. Oh my gosh, I have to book in. But they haven't seen the lineups outside of the facilities that have already opened. So the positive is there seems to be an appetite based on what we're seeing there. And if anybody has opened their facility in BC and they're on the call, they can share a little bit about that as well. But definitely take a look at that pre-booking opportunity for your members, because I think once you do open the doors, they'll appreciate it. I think that our biggest, I'm taking a look at operations. I'm the director of operations of Club 16 and Cheese Fit. So my job is making sure the personnel and the facilities, but mostly the personnel, are in place. I wanted to talk a little bit about the operations and the people, because I think that the facilities is one thing. We can separate equipment 6 feet, we can put up plexiglass, but I think it's really important not to skip on the fact that we have an opportunity here as a industry to create trust with the public and our members. And I think that's something that we can't skip. So I want to share a couple of strategies that I'm using to onboard our staff. As we slowly onboard our staff, we want to be safe and healthy as we do that. But don't miss out on the fact that the people that are out in our facilities, whether you have multi-club chains or one location, are the ones that are doing the hard work for us. We need to educate them. They're going to be educated over the next couple of weeks prior to you opening up your facility, or 3 weeks or a month, with so much new information that wasn't there before. So understand that, appreciate how much your staff can actually retain of that information, the different documents, the safe and health policy that you're going to have at your location, the forms are going to be signed. It's all going to be coming in really quick and really fast to them. So a strategy that we're using operation-wise at Club 16 is just, we're sharing that information, we're educating our teams as we onboard them on that information, and then we're taking a step back and giving them an overall macro picture of what they're looking at as they're coming into the facility. We're creating ease. We want them to not feel nervous about things. One of the strategies I've done in our leadership team initially is just sharing a strategy of, like, take a look at grocery stores. When grocery stores, when this all COVID thing first happened, all of us walked into the grocery store at one point or another and didn't know the rules. We didn't know what was going on. We saw decals up, we saw signs up, we saw people distancing, other people not distancing, and having an understanding that the clubs that are opening up now, we're educating our members. So there's going to be situations where a member isn't educated. So we need to give our staff the tools and the confidence to be able to answer questions, to communicate on those things. So I give them the example of the grocery stores because we are going to be opening our doors at one point. And there are clubs already in BC opening our doors, and in Manitoba, they need to understand that this is new for everybody, and there are going to be some friction points and there's going to be some successes, and we just have to be able to respond quickly to those. As well as in terms of the macro perspective, sharing all this different information, I'm really focusing on educating our staff on the three things that are really important: distancing, hygiene, and protection. So I'm picturing in my mind when we open up the doors, whenever we open up the doors, members coming in, and the most consistent question that's going to come up is, what are you doing to keep us safe? Staff, same thing. What are you doing to keep us safe? And from a macro perspective, they've told us that distance is the #1 thing, right? So staff need to know how to answer those questions. And so just utilizing some strategies like basically the answer to most questions is distancing, hygiene, and protection, and understanding through those subcategories exactly what we're doing to educate people. Because you can imagine if somebody comes into your facility and says, what are you doing to protect us? If there's a hesitation, that can't happen, right? That creates mistrust, and we have to build trust in our industry with the members and the public. So just educate your teams. My advice is educate your teams on everything, all the protocols, but understand that they're retaining very little of that. So take a macro perspective and say, here are the big ticket items that you need to understand as we open up the facilities. And I guess if hopefully that helps a little bit. If you're opening your doors, just understand that, you know, Manitoba and British Columbia, we're opening our doors first. So it is imperative that, you know, for people like Scott and Nathalie and the representatives of other provinces that have worked their asses off to communicate with their government officials, to put the work in, to put distancing in place, hygiene in place, protection in place for the staff, they're still not able to open up the doors. It is an obligation for all of us in British Columbia and Manitoba to ensure that we take our time, we do it safely, we do it healthy with our staff and our members in mind, and we do it successfully so that they can open up their doors sooner. So we all have an obligation to everyone in this province and in this country to ensure that we do it right. So I'll stop preaching on that, but I think that that's really important that everybody comprehends that. If you have friends in the business that aren't on this call, like I said last Friday, call them, inform them, share them of policies and procedures, and really, again, just take a step back and understand staff. Those are the people that are going to build trust within your facilities for the people walking in your door. And I just wanted to touch on that because I think we talk a lot about, you know, the functions of where we're moving equipment and plexiglass and all that. So I had a coffee. I could keep talking, but I'm going to stop.
Great. Thank you, Carl. That was fantastic.
Pumped up. I want to go work out.
Can I say something?
Let's go.
Sorry.
And then we'll just go to Ontario before we wrap up.
Okay. Sorry.
Oh, did you have something to say, Angela?
Yes, I have. Just to follow up on what Carl said, we meet this afternoon. We're going to do a dry run, like our protocol, our reopening protocol has gone out yesterday to trainers and staff. We will be going today point by point over it and let them retain it. Next Friday, we're going to do the fire drill, as Carl called it before, and they're going to try out every single bit on that protocol and then let them retain it. We will not be opening until the 15th, but we will be meeting 3 days before, and we will have another drill of every single bit we talked about. And clients will be getting, I think we are required to, send an email out that we are reopening, and we'll address every single point of what we are doing to keep them safe, but also to keep our staff safe, and that anybody not compliant, and I will say that up front, will not be allowed to come back.
All right, thank you, Angela. And if you could kindly maybe send us like a list of the things that you are going to be doing, that would be very helpful. So if Mario, if you wanted to touch base about Ontario, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So unfortunately, not a ton to talk about in Ontario. We did have some interesting, this week, we did have an opening of some outdoor sports, outdoor activities. I think for most facilities, if there's any on the line from Ontario who would be included in this, would be people with tennis facilities. So for example, my organization does run a tennis court, multiple tennis courts. So it came in, it's something we had to deal with this week. Tennis Canada put out some significant guidelines and rules for how to play. For example, no doubles, no switching sides, have to serve with your own ball, that sort of thing. And of course, the standard distancing, physical distancing, et cetera, et cetera. But that was pretty much it from Ontario this week. Nothing crazy going on. I've managed to reach out to a few people that I know in government agencies, nothing official, just kind of back channels. And the consensus that I got from most of the people who are not directly associated with this, but was that the government is not even considering gyms as of right now. There hasn't been much thought given to it at all. The overwhelming consensus is gyms are just simply not a priority right now. Too dirty, too dangerous, nothing to think about right now. Again, I want to be clear, there's nothing, that's not official. That's just, you know, completely backroom stuff that I've heard through various personal associates. That said, again, speaking for my facility, a large community center, we have begun proper opening plans. The idea that our CEO and our governance and our board gave us the direction of preparing for a June 1st opening. Granted, we all know this is completely ridiculously optimistic, but that's the beauty of working with boards, I suppose, an event. So we let them know that that's what we're working on. So similar to what Carl was saying, by the way, Carl, that was fantastic. That was great soapbox proselytizing. I loved it, man. Well done. Well done. If everybody had that kind of passion, we brought with this whole industry would be perfect. So yeah, that was great. As I said, we're working on opening sooner rather than later. We are working with a 10-foot radius. Apparently, there was a study out of McMaster University that suggested the 6x6 or the 36-foot radius was insufficient, particularly in heavy exercise situations. And then I know it was touched upon in that South Korean article as well. So we're working with a 10 by 10. Our capacity, our main gym floor is about 10,000 square feet. We're working with 30 people in at a given time. That's the number we're working with. Again, that's not official. That doesn't come from any agency. That's what our executive committee has decided. That's the number they want to work with, 30 people. My argument was it's no longer economically feasible to operate the gym with 30 people at a time, but this is what they want to do. So anyway, that's pretty much it for Ontario. If anybody else has anything to add, that's really it. Unless you want to get into larger discussions about the nuances about how to operate personal training, for example, group exercise classes, we're dropping down to, for example, our spin studio, or sorry, our studio cycling goes from 21 down to 5 participants at a time. So it's a significant reduction, and that seems to be the biggest bugaboo for our organizations, as to just how many people. But everybody's going to operate differently until we get some direction. So that's really it. We're just in a wait and see pattern. So if anybody has anything else to add, I'm happy to hear.
Great, thank you, Mario. And I believe that Saskatchewan and PEI are in the same boat right now and are just kind of waiting. So with that, we will start to wrap up the meeting. I do want to note that we could possibly extend this meeting by a half an hour since everybody has quite a bit to share. So please take a note about that for the coming week. And as you know, we will definitely keep you updated with all the information that we share. Graham here just noted that PEI can open June 1st, which is wonderful. Then we can add that into our provincial updates. Other than that, I do want to make sure everybody knows that National Health and Fitness Day is coming up on June the 6th, and Fitness Industry Council of Canada is running an event that goes from the East Coast to the West Coast, and it is a virtual event. So we would really like if our partners here on the call would share the information about the event, which we will be putting out, especially because it's about this industry coming together, and we are really working hard together in order to focus on sustainability and making sure that this industry survives. So it is a great day for us to promote each other and make sure we have a business that does survive this crisis. I noticed also on the side here, Melody, I believe you asked about virus and cleaning. So we have talked about that in previous meetings, so I can send that information out once again. And then if anybody has any topics that they would like to cover in other meetings, in the next meeting, please feel free to email me and we'll make sure that topic is on our agenda in order to make sure we cover as much ground as possible and we cover all the information that you think is important. So that being said, thank you again. If you're not a member of FIC, please join us. You can visit us at ficdn.ca to become a member or just email me and we can figure that out for you. Thank you so much for the call and we will see you same place, same time again next week.
Thank you.